everybody. It is month 10 of the 2023 Quilters Playcation Adventure Sewalong. I am so excited you are here with me to finish things off for 2023. It's been a year. It was a different year. It's been a challenging year for me personally. That's another issue. But we're here and we have been sewing together. I turn my machine on. We've been sewing together, we've been playing together, we've been having a good time, and we've been building our treasure map. And I'm pretty excited for today's block to finish it all off because it's the end goal. It is the treasure. And I've done something kind of fun with it. I simplified things, first of all, so that it would make it easier for everybody to just be able to do the work. Not the work, to just put the block together. We could get fancy with curves and all that stuff and perspective. And if you want to do that, knock yourself out. But I played around with a whole bunch of sketches trying to figure out the most graphic way and easy way, and a way that can still provide a lot of interest and really make it known that this is our treasure in the treasure map. So I'm excited about what I've done there. We're using some scraps. If you want, that's a choice. I'll show you that. And then when we're done, it'll be time to put it all together. I've already got the rest of the blocks on the wall. You can see I've been playing around with a couple of things that we might do or I might do. Everybody's blocks are different, so they're all going to look a little bit different in terms of how you put them together. So I'm excited for today. I'm excited to wrap things up, and then I'm going to give you a little hint about next year's Sewalong. I wasn't sure if I was going to do one next year, but I've decided that I am definitely going to, because I came up with a really cool idea that I like. So I'll give you a hint about that at the end of today's live. A couple of things, housekeeping, bear with me today. I really didn't sleep last night, and I haven't been sleeping well for the last week or so. Good old insomnia with the perimenopause and restless legs all rolled up together, and it's a great uncomfortable package for nighttime sleeping. So I didn't sleep last night. I probably also didn't sleep last night because a little bit of extra anxiety. I put my middle kid on a plane today, and I'm not with her. My husband's not with her. Grandma's not with her. Her sister's not with her. She has just gone with a coach and a teammate to a competition internationally, and we're so proud of her and we're so excited for her. But you know, Mama Bear nerves here are a little frazzled. So if I flub up on some words or instructions, be patient with me. I'll probably catch them. If not, you know, you can let me know in the comments where I screwed up, and if you've got any confusion, I'm happy to do that. So for everybody joining, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are joining us from, whenever you are joining us. We are here today to finish up the treasure block for the Quilters Playcation Adventure Sewalong. I'm excited you're here. Let's get sewing. I might turn the light on. It'll be better over the table. It doesn't look so good with me and everything, but we're having like a freakishly warm day here in Calgary, but it's overcast, which is super annoying. Oh well. Oh well. Let's flip this around. There we go. You can see my door. And there's the ladies. Oh, and you know what else is exciting news here? We got a puppy. I don't know if you know, but we had to say goodbye to our dog in the summertime while I was away, actually. We had to say goodbye to our dog, and I finally, a few weeks ago, caved and said, I want a puppy. I want a dog, and we decided on a puppy so that we could do some of the training that would make it easier for life with kids. So we got a dog. I can't show him to you today, unfortunately, because my husband took him to the office. So how dare he? But you'll have to check out my Instagram and you'll see some pictures of the dog. He's a total sweetheart. Okay, so I said I was going to do something fun for our treasure. First of all, just want to give you a hint on where things came. This was me doing a whole bunch of sketches, looking at illustrations and photographs of treasure chests, trying to figure some stuff out. And then I came up with this design. So it is still an open box, but we're just going to see it kind of dead on from the front. It makes for really easy assembly, but still a very visible sort of thing. And you can play around with stuff. I want to talk about fabrics though for this, because we need the box fabric, but whatever is the front, you're going to actually want something a little bit darker for here. And then because that's going to be the back of the box, it's receding, sorry for the shadows, it is receding behind the treasure and the front of the box. So choose something a little bit darker with a bit of a change in print if you go with prints, so that it's there. Something fun for the treasure. I'll show you that in a second. And then you're going to need or want, I think, just to really accentuate the box idea, we're going to frame it out. And so you want a contrast for that. It can be a contrasting color. I've got all shade variations on brown fabric. So the fabric I have for the front here and the back here has some pink in it. And then my sort of outline has some blue with the brown. And so that's where I'm getting my contrast. But I got to show you what I've decided to use for my treasure. I thought it was pretty ingenious. I'm going to use one of my crumb blocks for my treasure. So I have a giant stack of crumb blocks that I've made over time, and I thought, what a perfect treasure for my treasure map quilt. It gives the idea of jewels and fun and lots of energy inside, but as a quilter, this is also a treasure, right? All of the different fabrics, the memories tied up in all of this. So I think it's really sort of, metaphorically, but also visually kind of a neat thing to add into the quilt. So that's what we've got going on. So that's my treasure. If you don't have a crumb block, don't want to make a crumb block, maybe you could use an orphan block or something else, but you could also go into your stash and see what you've got for some fabrics. I just want to show you this. I think some of these K facets, this one's in grays. It's not the best color, but I have seen this print in a lot of different colors. That would be a neat one for treasures. I liked this one. I went into my multicolor bin and picked out a whole bunch of different ones because they just have that kind of energy of a big jewel box, right? I liked this one because it also had that idea of baubles, right? Chains and necklaces and stuff like that. Again, another bright baubles, jewels. Depending on your fabric, you can play around with it. This one is a floral, but in a smaller piece, would look kind of interesting and add a lot of energy. And this one I chose with a white background, but again, all of those kind of jewel stone colors, more baubles that we've got. You could also go into your yellows and pick something that just looks like gold, right? Just have a really strong yellow or gold color to kind of have that glow inside the box. This one has that idea of gold necklaces and baubles inside the box. So lots of different choices. Of all the fabrics I showed you, I think this is the newest, and it's probably still a year or two old. The rest were all buried in my stash. So take a dive through your stash. You might find something really interesting that you can use for the treasure. Or put a favorite fabric or fussy cut something if you've got it. A cool novelty print that will work. I'm gonna go with my crumb block. See, already the brain is failing. Now this is the fabric that I've chosen for the front of the treasure chest, and this is the fabric that I've chosen for the top of the treasure chest. Right now, this looks enormous. It's going to get smaller. I am going to trim this one down a little bit. It is going to get smaller. And with perspective, the things that we're going to do with perspective to get us where we want, it's going to change things. So I'm going to start with the center panel because the size of that is going to determine how big the box goes. It's a lot easier to do it that way. because it has the angles to make sure that we're kind of matching up with what we have on the top and the bottom. So I'm going to set that aside and the top aside. And you can see this is the fabric that I've chosen for my edges. It's a little bit darker and it has blue, so it has a bit of a different pattern to it. Okay. This one does have a directional print to it. I don't think that's a big deal at all. I did cut some to be the sort of horizontal bars, but if I don't pay attention and I miss that, I'm not going to lose sleep over it. So let's get to this. I just want to remind you, we're going to be doing this center thing. So I've got it broken down, the block, into 3 rows that we're going to make. So we're going to make this center row first. So really all we have to do is take this crumb block and we're going to add some angles down the side with our outlined fabric. And we're going to have them on an angle, and then we're just going to sew pieces of background on the edge. You want to sew the background at this point. We don't want to wait till the end because we've got angles and then you're going to have Y seams, and we're trying to make this easy and fun, right? So first step is I need to decide how tall I want this to be and which direction, which side I'm cutting off or not cutting off. And I think I'm actually going to cut off more towards the top because I have this dark piece and this blue piece. I don't want it to be enormous, so I'm going to cut here. And in my case, I want to cut so that whatever I cut off is still a functional piece. But that doesn't really matter if you're cutting just from regular fabric, or if you make a crumb block. You can kind of make it whatever size you want. But I'm just going to throw this piece back with my other crumbs. It'll get used on another block. Okay, so now we're not quite so tall. Already we're getting a bit smaller. And I want to be able to add these strips. Now I'm putting them on here because I want to sort of eyeball the angle that I want. I'm not going to get too fussed about whether these are at the exact same angle, but I am going to make sure that I've come down enough so that when I cut straight along there, I don't have any missing corners. So I think I'm going to go with that. Let's just cut off some of this excess so it's out of the way. So I want to do that. I'm happy with where these are. So I'm actually just going to place my ruler on here and slice. So it's almost like that layered angle bit, except I've cut these strips already. So again, the little pieces of crumbs that I'm cutting off, I am going to keep. They'll get used again. I promise you that. Whoops. And again, just because the angle on this one, I was able to layer that, not layer it, put the ruler on top. So now I want to go ahead and sew these together. Pretty basic sewing. Let's just adjust this. There we go. So I want to remember that I need to have some overhang on both sides. Okay, that's one. Put my little spider in. And then before I press, I'll just sew the other one. I'm going to maximize my time at the machine. I think the crumb block is going to add a really kind of interesting bit of color, and it's going to make it kind of a little bit more dynamic. Okay. So pretty straightforward, right? I'm going to go ahead and press this. I am going to press towards my strips because I kind of want them to pop out a little bit and the treasure to look like it's receding within the box. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add background to this. So I just have a long strip of my background fabric. I do apologize for the shadows. Let me turn off the light and see what happens. I think we can still see pretty well. It beats the shadows, right? There's still a few, but okay. So I'm going to want to add fabric to the outside of this to create the rest of my block. I used to have a like light that you use for streaming and stuff like that. However, I've lost the battery charger for it, and it's one of those unique ones. I literally had it one day and then I didn't. So we will go with this. So I'm going to go ahead, and now this is when we're going to be layering our fabrics right sides up so that we can cut that matching angle. And I'm going to kind of just eyeball that's how wide I want the block to be for this time, just so I don't have to deal with all that extra there. So I have the one. I do have that scrap because I've used a print. I can't necessarily flip it over and use it on the other side. Although with this kind of beige fabric, I could, and it would just add some interesting variations. But I'm not going to do that today. I have enough of the fabric. I kind of topped up my beige section there. So that's going to be the one side. We'll give that a good press. But first I'm going to do the other side. And then I'll press them both. So you'll see when I'm layering them up, I'm not layering it up over here and having this giant kind of scrap behind. I'm just going right to the end over here so that the piece that I cut off that's behind here is kind of as small as possible, just to minimize my scraps. You know, it's me. It's going to get used at some point, and I hope you'll use yours at some point. And then again, just cut that bit off. And once I sew this seam and we press it, we're going to have our middle section, which is probably, you know, the most complex. The top is actually almost identical. We're going to be doing the top pretty much the exact same way, but just a different angle. So we have that. I'm going to go ahead and press that now. So that's ready. And then what we're going to do before we do the top is I'm actually going to get this row trimmed up, because we want to know we're doing improv work here, right? We all know that. But if we want things to look like what we want them to be, in this case, a treasure chest, we do want things to line up a little bit. So I'm going to trim off. I'm just going to use this ruler, which is not quite long enough, so I'll go to there. I want to trim off the top and the bottom so that I can see how big I need to make the portion of the next thing. So I'm also going to do it parallel. So I have, I'm going to move this over here. And then I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Ooh, not that much. Sorry. There. So I want to have a parallel, like a perfectly parallel strip. So we kind of freehand did the sewing part, but we're going to do our cutting and trim it so that we have some measurement. What is that measurement going to be? Whatever it can be, which in this case is going to be 4 3/4. Right? I'm just minimizing how much I trim off the bottom. It's just cleaning up the edge a little bit, but I can get that full cut, the full width. So there we have these little scraps. right? We're just going to put them aside. Okay. So there we have our middle section, the treasure itself. Now I got to build the box. So you'll remember from our drawing that the top one is almost basically the opposite. The only exception is that it has another bar across the top. So we are going to do the exact same thing. We're going to start with our fabric here. We are going to take our blue bits first, and we're going to add them on at an angle. In this case, I'm kind of trying to make, the angle look like, let's zoom out a little bit. Ooh, that zoomed in. There we go. We're going to try to make, I'm going to move this over so we can see a little bit better with the light. We want to kind of have this angle be mirrored a little bit. If it's not exactly the same, don't worry about it. So what I like to do is kind of decide on one side first, right? I know it's going to be like that. These pieces aren't cut the exact same width, so they're not going to perfectly line up here. If that's going to bother you, make sure they're cut the same width. It's not going to bother me, I don't think. So I'm going to line up and I'm going to do this cut. Right, so I'm going to have that piece, and I'm actually going to go ahead and sew this one first. I'm not going to do both cuts and then sew. I'm going to sew one so that I have my exact to get it lined up there. And now that I said that I'm not going to have it be the same, I think I might. Which means, of course, it won't line up because I'm trying to make it line up. That's sort of the Murphy's Law of improv piecing, is that the more you try to make it line up, the worse it, not the worse it looks, the less likely it is to line up. Okay. So have that be nice and flat. Right, I can just use the seam there. Now, if I want to make sure these line up, what I need to do is I need to measure how wide that strip is. So it's exactly 3/4 of an inch, which means from this seam to the edge, I need an inch because I'm going to have a 1/4 inch seam allowance, right? So I'm going to go ahead and cut that to be an inch, which is actually would have been pretty close. There's just kind of a little bit of extra there. Okay. So now we know it's going to be there. But before I sew the other part on, I want to add this piece here. So I'm going to grab another one of my strips, which I don't seem to have any long enough. Oh, there's, I thought I cut more. Oh, that's that other angle. So let me cut a couple more. If I can figure out where I put that fabric. It should be right here. There it is. Just buried in the bin. So just let me cut a few more strips. No big deal. Now I'm just going to freehand cut these. I can deal with any measurement stuff afterwards. That should be plenty, but I'll keep that other fabric handy this time, right? Okay. So again, we want that treasure piece, and we want this piece, and then we want one of our strips. Now, the placement of the strip, one thing we have to factor in here is seam allowance. If I just line this strip up, here, and go, oh, it's perfectly matched up. Once I cut this and sew it, it's actually going to be over a little bit. So while it is not going to be perfect, I am going to move it over, you know, roughly that 3/4 of an inch. I have too much below just to maximize what I can use. So again, these are both sewn so they can line up. And we're going to go with this cut so that when it's sewn, it will hopefully be pretty close. Will it be exactly on? Probably not, but it will be pretty close. And then I don't need all of that, so I cut it up. So just put that aside for scraps, and I'm going to go ahead and sew this on. And then it's the next step that makes it a little bit different. Okay, I'll just give that a little press so we can see where it is. We'll just double check, although at this point there's not really much you can do unless you want to redo the whole thing. So actually, I did pretty good. I'm impressed with myself. Okay, so I want to add something along the top here, right? I want this to be the edge of the box. That piece is actually not long enough. And I want to do this first and then add my sides to this. Because if I add my sides now and then add the top, then I'm again worrying about trying to match things up when I don't really need to put myself through that effort. At this point, I also can decide, is this too tall? Is it fine? I mean, it's either going to be too tall or too short or just right. If it's too short, there's not much you can do in terms of making it work. You can add stuff on, but remember this piece is going to make it bigger. If it's too tall, you can trim it down, right? It's entirely a preference. The perspective will be there, especially once we add the front of this. But you may want it a little bit shorter to just kind of change that perspective that it is receding. I don't know. I'm going to cut the difference and go here. So just remember that whatever piece you have needs to be long enough for those angles there. So I'm going to go like this, and I'm going to just give myself a nice fresh cut along there. And then sew this piece on, and then we'll add the background pieces just like we did the other ones. So you can see in this block, the sewing isn't difficult. It just requires a little bit of thought, right? Whenever we're doing this sort of improv with intent idea, that's exactly what happens. It just requires a little bit of thought, thinking it through. But if you can do a crappy little sketch, you can figure it out, I promise. Or you can just follow what I'm doing. And that makes it all easier, right? Makes it all easier. Okay, let's set that aside for now. We're going to go ahead and add some of this background to here. Let's do it the same way we did last time, right? Minimizing the scrap we have here. I'm just going to cut this piece in half. And we'll go from there. So we're layering them right sides up. I'm going to go ahead and cut that angle. Now, what I just realized is that this trim piece is going to finish up a lot wider than this. If again, we want a chance that they line up, I should probably trim that down a little bit. But my angle is there, so I'm happy with that. So I'm just going to trim that to 1 inch. There we go. So just trim off a little bit. If you're worried that the angle has changed, you can always go ahead and do a second cut. I'm going to be fine with it because I have so much wiggle room for the squaring up part that it'll be okay. I'm not aiming for perfect on grain. Just doing what I can to make it not be so wonky, right? That's all. Okay, and then we're going to do the same on the other side. Just unravel it for you so you can see. And we will now I see I have a lot extra, so I'm just cutting that bit off. And now I'm going to cut here. Make sure that's laying nice and flat and give myself a fresh cut. So we cut right sides up and we sew right sides together. So just flip that back over. And that, my friends, is the top of the box. All right, once I give it a good press, we have the top of our box, of our treasure box. Still not looking like much, but it's coming together. Remember, this is improv quilting. This is not, you know, fine art, perfect replication of things so that it has to look exactly the same. We want the representation of it. We want to go, oh yeah, there's the treasure chest, but we don't need to have it be absolutely perfect and oh my God, it doesn't have all these details and so on and so forth. So there we go. You can see these bits are a little bit wider. I'm not going to lose feet. I actually think it adds a little bit of dimension. So I always tell my students that there's no such thing as a mistake. There's only design decisions. Okay. So the other thing to factor in now is when we sew these together, yeah, we should be good. So I'm going to go ahead and sew these together, but first I want to give this a nice straight line. What I don't want to do is just, you know, take my ruler and cut it straight because that effort I put into it lining up here isn't going to stay. So we're actually going to do basically that layered kind of effect where we have them where we want it to be, which you can see we kind of have some, you know, the top and the bottom are a little bit wonky, or top and the middle, I guess, are a little bit wonky compared to each other, but they're still working. So we're good. So I'm going to go ahead and cut across. And this way I can make sure, you know, I have those matching moments. Now I'm going to go ahead and flip them over so that they're right sides together. Discard what's below here. But before I go to the machine, it's one of the few times, folks, you're going to see me pin, just because I want those to line up. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm not just going to pin them and hope for the best. I'm going to pin them in a bit of a different way. I'm going to pin them with different pins than these, because those are bent, but here's a couple good ones. I'm going to pin them with pins that don't have a head. I don't know if it'll focus for me. That don't have a head. They just have this tiny little metal bit, so it differentiates them from a needle, right? But I'm going to pin it where I have that intersection of the trim pieces of my trunk on the 1/4 inch mark. I'll show you closer in a second, because what I want to do is pretend that they are sewn and double check that everything is lining up as it should. So if you've followed me or taken any class with me, you've seen this technique before. I'm pinning, you know, to mimic the seam there. And then I'm going to fold this up and go, does that line up how I want? Pretty close. I'm happy with it. So I'm going to go with that. I can just leave those pins in there. I know where they are, and then I go to the machine. And we sew them down. And then once this seam is done, I'm going to give this bit a good press so that everything is laying the way we want it to before we do the bottom. So let's head over to the pressing spot, aka my wool mat, and iron. So remember, we're pressing flat to set that seam, and then I need to decide, do I want to press up? Do I want to press open? Do I want to press down? I definitely don't want to press down. 2 reasons. 1, there's a lot of seams here where there's none there. So it just functionally, that's making my life easier. And 2, I think emphasizing the top as this is being recessed within everything works a little bit better for the design. But mostly it's just going to be easier to press up in my case. There we go. I want that nice and flat at this point, and I think I'm out of water for my iron. So I'll use a little bit of flatter to make sure that's laying well. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. Now we add the bottom of our treasure chest. So let's head back over here. This one's the easiest part because all we need to do are add sides and a bottom and then background pieces. And it's just going to be a rectangle. I think I might make this, before I add the sides, just a touch shorter. I'll do it from up here. Right, just a little bit shorter. I am using the ruler. I'm not measuring, but I just want a nice straight line. Again, you can use the block that you have and like where the points are here to line it up. And I'm just going to pre-trim it, and I really only need to trim just like a smidge off one side. I'm not even measuring it. I'm eyeballing it entirely. Because if it's not perfect, I'm not going to lose sleep over it. But I think that's good. So I'll add my 2 bits. We'll add the bottom. We'll add the sides. Sew it together. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 seams left to go. We can do this. We can absolutely do this. So we'll go there. That's going to be 1. And then that one's pretty much the right size. So again, just like the other ones, I'm doing the sides first and then the bottom. We'll just be consistent on that. So I really hope that everybody has enjoyed making this treasure map. My abstract version has been a really interesting challenge to take the concepts and maybe the techniques of the sewing and kind of just do something different with it. So it doesn't have to be, I'm going to use the word literal here, but I said before today, like earlier today, that this doesn't have to be super, super literal either, right? So we've got that. I'm just going to use the seam ruler at this point. So I haven't made the treasure chest or the treasure for the abstract one, but having decided to use the crumb block, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take scraps from the bright colors of what I have and make treasure out of them. So I think that's what I'm going to do. We'll see. Oh, look at that. That's like almost exactly the perfect length. How lucky am I? We got to take our wins, right? Life is not always easy. Yesterday was the Mondayest of Mondays for me. I'm just going to go ahead and trim off these seam allowances before I sew. You can do them after, as long as you do it, right? So whether you do it before or after with the scissors or the rotary cutter and a ruler, doesn't matter. But yeah, yesterday was a bit of a Monday, but we got through it. My husband had to run to the shop in the evening, so I watched Virgin River without having to listen to him complain about it, and without me having to watch it on the laptop. I could watch it on the TV. So, you know, simple pleasures at the end of the day. That show is really just so bad. It's really not very good, but I watch it anyways. And I'm still trying to figure out how much time is supposed to have elapsed over the course of the 5 seasons. I feel like it hasn't even been 1 year in their lives. But I digress. Okay. So there we go. So I'm just going to add bits on the side, which I need to cut some more of that fabric. Where did I put it? I thought I left it out so that I could do that. I promise you there it is. See, I did leave it out in a very obvious spot. I just forgot where that obvious spot was. That is the lack of sleep and perimenopause brain in there. So, okay. So I just need to cut some little bits for here. I'm going to go ahead, and this is not a directional fabric, so I'm just actually going to cut one big strip off of that and get it out of the way. It's much easier to just work that way. Okay, and yes, it's too big, but that's okay. It's not like I won't use what's left over. So we just have to sew those two on the ends. Right, no big deal. And then we will put all of this last row on with the other one. And we'll have a finished block, which I'm really excited about. It's our treasure. The culmination of the year together. It's going to be a blast. Okay. So let's give this a proper press now. And then we will line up our 2 rows. Give ourselves a nice straight edge to cut from, especially on this bottom piece. And sew them together to finish our block. Okay. You know what? Now that I look at it, I think I want a piece, one of these trim pieces on top. I think that's actually how I sketched it out. It is, but I've already sewn on the sides. What do I do? Crap. It's a really easy fix. This will be one of the few times you will see me use a seam ripper. Of course, I have to find one because I don't use them that often. You could simply slice right along this seam, remove these side pieces so that you can add the top. But I kind of like the width that these are already. So I'm just going to go ahead and use them. So all I'm going to do is actually just undo this seam just enough to sew another horizontal piece on. That's all. So give myself a couple inches on each side. Right? Sometimes we have to make not mistakes. We change our mind with the design. That's what I'm calling it. I made a design decision that I wanted one of the trim pieces on my treasure chest on the top of the treasure chest. So I've got these. I'm just actually going to make my life easier and pin them out of the way so I don't accidentally stitch one of these flaps. And then I need a piece to go across here, which of course I don't have. So we will cut that. But I remembered where my fabric was this time. Conveniently, I will make sure I cut a piece long enough, which is going to be that. And then I'll sew this on. So, you know, I lied. It's taken us one little extra step. But if you do it right, you'll be happier, right? So I'm going to go ahead and sew that on. Because I pinned those flaps out of the way, I don't have to be worried that they're going to get caught anywhere. So there we go. I just need to press that and then unpin these and sew it back together. Now in all of these cases, I've been pressing towards these trim or outline pieces just to accentuate them as well from a design perspective. They're not super skinny, so it really isn't a big deal. So now I have this, and you're going to go, oh, Cheryl, but this one isn't long enough. Nope, it's not, but it just means that this one's long enough. This one is going to be quite a bit shorter. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to replace that piece. It's not a big deal. Right? I have more of that strip that I cut. I will just get rid of that. There we go. Where did that strip go? See, I got a leftover strip. We'll just sew that puppy right on there long enough. Bob's your uncle. So I made a little bit more work for myself, but I'd rather have it right and be happy with the design than be annoyed when every time I look at the quilt. One side, then we can sew the other, and all I'm doing, see, it's not even, well, this one was a whole new piece I added on, but this one I just have that little bit. You can just go down the whole seam again, or you can go, oops, sorry. You can just go down this whole seam again, and it'll be extra reinforced plus the end, or you can put your needle in, you know, about 1/2 inch above and sew down. I have a little spider in my machine, so I'm just going to redo the whole seam. That little bit of thread, an extra 5 seconds, is easier than having short threads and dealing with everything else. Okay, now I'll give this a good press and we'll attach it, cut and attach it to the rest of the block to finish it off. I think that was worthwhile. It looks a lot better, even just sitting here on the iron or the pressing mat. It looks a lot better. I like it. I like it. Okay. Let's move all these scraps to the side so we don't have that distraction. And we are going to bring these together. There we go. Let's just change that angle. There we go. We're going to bring them together. So in this case, I kind of want my outsides to line up, not my insides, because I have this big bar across the top. So it's not really about the outsides lining up. I'm not going to get too fussed on whether they're perfectly lined up or not. They're just kind of centered. It changes nothing in terms of design. So I've got that there. I'm happy with it. I'm going to give this a nice straight cut. I am happy with where my upper one is. Get rid of those little bits. And I'm going to go ahead. I don't need the pins this time because I'm feeling pretty confident about eyeballing it on either side. Just trying to center my treasure part with the trim pieces of that bottom bit. Okay, like always, you now have to wait for me to do this last seam to see it. As before, just in terms of pressing direction, I am going to press away from my treasure, so towards the bottom, so that the front of the box is really kind of popping out from what I've got. Oh, I like it. It's fun. Is it that round top treasure chest that a lot of people were think of or were maybe even were expecting? No. I'm going to be honest with you. It is not that, but I still think it gives the same idea. There's our treasure chest. And I think especially once we have background fabric or something to define the top and the bottom, so you can go ahead and add that now. I'm not, because depending on where this goes in the quilt and how it gets put together, I would be doubling up on the sewing part. So I'm just going to leave it blank for the moment. But you could go ahead and finish this. Now this block is fairly large. She is, about 14 inches wide and 15 and a bit tall. So if you want to make things smaller, by all means, it's doable. You're just going to start with a smaller center portion, and that will dictate how big everything else comes. I really wanted to kind of show off the treasure. And my X was very large, and I wanted this to be a lot bigger than my X. For the design of the overall quilt. So that's why I kind of went with the bigger size. But yeah, all you have to do is, if you want a smaller one, start with a smaller rectangle for your treasure. You actually really don't need that big of a piece for what it is. Just make sure it's something that's going to be bold and stand out and look like treasure, right? Be maybe more colorful, or the gold or something, a different color from what you've been doing, or a brighter version of things that you've been doing, so that it does kind of stand out a little bit more in there. So let's say goodbye to the ladies for 2023. I'll come back into the light over here and show the block again. Right? There we are with our block, our treasure chest, and the crumbs is the treasure. I love it. Throw it up here on the design wall behind us. I'm pretty excited about that. Oh, see, when it's far away like that, awesome. I love the way it looks there on the design wall. Really quite fun. So pretty excited about that. That is the end for 2023 and our Quilters Playcation Adventure Sew Along. I'm so happy and excited that you joined me. I know today was a long one, but the treasure is the most important part, right? So a little bit more detail on this block. Now, about 2024. I'll be honest, I wasn't going to do it. I was thinking, it's time to just move on and do something a little bit different. But then I came up with an idea that I'm super excited about. And so I couldn't not share it with you. I'm not going to share all of it with you just yet. Stay tuned for an announcement on that. But know that next year we're going back to weekly. Haven't decided whether it's Instagram or YouTube yet, but we are going back to weekly events for the Adventure Sew Along. We have a theme as well, but it's not so much a pictorial theme like this year. I will, as always, be doing 2 versions of it. Going to change things up a little bit on how those versions, what's the difference between the 2 versions. But just know that the goal is for 49 blocks. So that gives me 1 week at the beginning of the year to discuss fabric selection, because I think it's going to be a little bit more important this year. So I want to have 1 day where we talk about fabric selection. That's going to be the first week. And then we're going to have 49 blocks. And that allows me some wiggle room if there's travel or I'm sick or something like that, that I'm not stressed about getting those all 52 weeks. Also, from a design point of view, if you have 49 blocks, you can have rows of 7 by 7 in a quilt, which is a lot easier to put together than 52, as we all learned with 2022s. So that is your little sneak peek for it. I hope you have a wonderful week. I am going to, go enjoy the weather, because it's supposed to be like almost record highs, like 15 degrees Celsius today, but it's so overcast and dreary. Ugh. It is what it is. I'll probably still get out a walk because I got that puppy, right? So thank you everybody for participating this year. Make sure to tag me on, if you post something on YouTube or on Instagram, use the hashtag Quilters Playcation or QP Adventure Sewalong. Hashtags are weird on Instagram right now, but I do try to check them and see everything that I can, but it's probably best to tag me if you really want me to see it, because then I really see it, because of the way the hashtag searches work now. We're slaves to the algorithm. Anyways, what we really need to be is embracing our play, and that's what this is all about. So thank you for playing with me. I will see you all live in 2024 with a brand new Adventure Sew Along. I hope you'll play along with us. I hope you've enjoyed playing along here, and we'll see you online. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.